Welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 29, Political Theory in a Globalizing World. And we start with topic globalization and identity politics. Having discussed the liberal and Marxist strengths of modern political theory and having indicated how both of them have been challenged by postmodernism, it is now time to try to conjure up some of the contours of political theory in the era of globalization. Identity politics is emerging as one of the most central aspects of political theory. Two important dimensions of this question of identity politics are important. First, that identities are multiple. A woman has a gender identity, but she also belongs to a caste, a religion, a community, an occupational group, a region, and a linguistic group, etc. In fact, she has all these identities. What postmodernism tries to do is to privilege her gender identity over her other identities. While identity politics will remain relevant to the era of globalization, the issue as to which particular identity would become primary and which ones will become secondary will be a contingent on the way globalization and market forces affect different segments of human society in different countries. Secondly, all identities are socially constituted, and the way these get constituted in the era of globalization will determine the broad nature of political theory that will emerge. There is another dimension of globalization. It will undoubtedly multiply the material desires and wants of the individual, but it will find it difficult to satisfy them fully. But even if we assume for a sake of argument that globalization will be able to satisfy all the material wants and desires of all the individuals, the question still remains whether it will be able to bring about the good life. Here, Aristotelian emphasis on Machiavellian ethics becomes crucial. Will globalization create good citizens, citizens who are virtuous, citizens who are moral beings? After all, it is only good citizens who would make a good state, and it is only a good state which will make good citizens. As Aristotle has pointed out in a different context, the state came into being for the sake of life, but continues for the sake of good life. This question has become extremely relevant in political theory in the era of globalization. How will globalization affect the virtues and values of justice, freedom, and equality, which all human societies have cherished in all ages? Will it intensify social Darwinism, survival of the fittest? Will the degeneration of the environment lead to greater happiness or more miseries? These are some of the questions which will become increasingly relevant in political theory in the era of globalization. Next point is synthesis in political theory. It is not possible to neatly state the exact nature of political theory in the era of globalization. However, if one were to rely on the logic of dialectics in history, then one can say with some degree of certainty that political theory in the era of globalization will exhibit at one level a synthesis of liberalism and Marxism. At another level, it will exhibit a synthesis of modern political theory and postmodernist trends and tendencies. While the nature of political theory in the era of globalization will be contingent on the emerging local, national, and global conditions, it will demonstrate some sort of amalgam of the universal and the particular, the global and the local, the macro and the micro, unity and difference, order and disorder, community and chaos. The issue of social justice might occupy the central stage in the midst of growing inequality and poverty that globalization necessarily entails. Democracy may become more participatory, the state may become weaker in some respects and stronger in other respects. Next topic is welfare state versus minimal state. We are aware that in the course of about last 150 years, the earlier theory of state whose concern was only to maintain law and order, the police state, has yielded place slowly but surely to a welfare state which has taken up wide ranging functions like health, education, and well being of the citizens. The critical question in political theory in the era of globalization is whether or not the liberal and democratic state will continue to follow public policies aimed at the welfare of those who are suffering social and economic deprivation. The present day welfare state has become what may be called a maximal state. It seems that in the wake of liberalization, privatization, and globalization, some of the welfare functions of the modern welfare state may shrink, while the future state will continue to perform regularity functions. Its distributive functions are likely to become less and less. In fact, the state might become a minimal state. The philosophy of utilitarianism, with its focus on the greatest happiness of the greatest number, which has been the linchpin of modern welfare state, will no more remain the guiding principle of the future state. Given the individualistic majoritarian underpinning of liberal democracy, the state will have to buy legitimacy for itself at periodic elections, and therefore it will find it very difficult to altogether give up the welfare functions. Thus, we can say that political theory in the era of globalization will reflect the structural ambivalence of modern state, and the tensions and paradoxes, pulls and push inherent in politics as it operates under the sway of market forces. Next point is the blurring of state sovereignty. We know that one of the key elements of state as it is understood in political theory is sovereignty, which implies that the state is internally supreme and externally independent. The state in the era of liberalization will be one in which sovereignty will no more remain as sacrosanct as earlier. The world will increasingly become a global village and a global market. In this scenario, the external aspect of state sovereignty will get compromised at best and will become a myth at worst. In several respects, the state will not remain extremely independent. It will have to tailor its behavior according to the norms decided globally for all the states, either by world organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, or the United Nations, or by the various global coalitions and regional groups. A la European Union, the way UN weapon inspectors have been sent to carry out inspection in Iraq to make sure that it does not possess any weapons of mass destruction in a case in point. The way global peacekeeping forces are controlling the belligerence of states in different parts of the world, or the way some ramshackle global coalitions are trying to tame the behavior of certain states, illustrates the diminishing external sovereignty of the state. Another dimension of sovereignty relates to the internal supremacy of the state over all individuals and groups. This Austrian theory of sovereignty, which is a monastic theory, has already come under attack at the hand of the pluralists. In the era of globalization, this attack will increasingly manifest in the form of denial to the national majority, the claim to be sole legitimate expression of sovereignty of the people. The internal sovereignty of the modern state will be replaced by more diffuse sovereign power of the state, on the one hand, and of its constituent entity on the other, in the form of rights of different social groups and the rights of the federating units. Next point is role of WTO, multinationals and NGOs. The role of the state is internal supremacy and its monopoly of power to take decisions on political, economic, and social issues is being jeopardized by the ever expanding role of the multinationals. The structural adjustment that states all over the world are being compelled to make under the aegis of the WTO regime and the World Bank has led to a situation where no state can claim to be internally supreme today as it was earlier. Political theory in the era of globalization will have to address itself to these shifts. The modern state is also being compelled increasingly to follow the dictates of non government organizations, NGOs. This is particularly so in matters relating to collective security, human security, and human rights. In addition to the environmental issues, the questions of ecological balance and sustainable development has become extremely relevant. Even the use of violence by the modern state against its own citizens is becoming increasingly open to outside and inside scrutiny by agencies like Amnesty International, Asia Watch, UN Commission on Human Rights, and Public People's Union for Civil Liberties. Right to information and right to development will acquire the status of fundamental right. Here we want to wind up this lecture and thank you so much for your attention.